for joining us today. This is our second eWear student seminar on, hopefully, a seminar series that is going to last for quite some time. We have already started planning some events for the coming season starting in September. Today, we have two speakers. We're trying still to reach out to the second one. It seems that he must have had some kind of problem on the way here, but I'm going to start by introducing good friend George. George is CEO and co-founder of Senior Solutions Incorporated. It's a company that is based here in Palo Alto, focusing on wearable technology for monitoring feelings and mood. And probably he's going to give much more information about how they do that and how they can use this type of information in order to assist us in our daily life and managing our mental health. George has a background in electrical engineering, technology management, finance systems. He's kind of like the combo for like kind of what is needed to be a CEO in this company. I'm going to give it to him from now on, and George,
Can you hear me well? I'm usually not talking loud enough, so if you can't hear me, just tell me to turn on the volume. Thank you for the invitation, Oresti. Thank you guys for coming. We're going to talk about my favorite subject today, which is how technology can help us recognize human emotions and what can we do after we recognize those emotions. What type of interventions can we design and provide to the users to help them in any way. But before telling you more about the technology, which I'm sure is the reason why we're here today, I'll tell you a little bit more about why we're doing that and why we're building our product, which is called Feel. The reason is to help people suffering from mental health issues live happier lives. And I'm sure you know that this is a very big issue. In the US alone, there are 1 out of 5 people suffer from anxiety and depression. Around the globe, according to the World Health Organization, there are 350 million people diagnosed with depression. And in the US alone, the lost earnings from untreated mental health issues is $198 billion. So it's a pretty big issue. And although nowadays we have so many technologies to track our physical well-being, our fitness, our sleep, we still don't have anything to help us with our mental health and emotional well-being. Pretty much everything has stayed the same for the past 100 years. People just go to their psychotherapist when they suffer from mental health issue, or they do nothing because it's still stigmatized. And in more intense and severe situations, they take drugs. 2.5 years ago, with all the evolution of the wearable technology, we were talking with a very good friend of mine and my co-founder, and he introduced me to the field of affective computing, which basically says that through technology we can recognize human affect, different emotional states. And there are a variety of ways that we can do that, right? It's one of them is through the monitoring and computer vision of using computer vision techniques to recognize facial gestures, emotional states correlated to the gestures of the face of the user. And this is the way that we are using as human beings to say if someone is sad, if they're angry. We look at them, and when they look like this, it means that they're angry. If they smile, it means that they are happy. And in a similar way, computer vision algorithms, they can do that. Also, another way to recognize human affect is through the monitoring of the speech of the person. Probably you have noticed when you are talking on the phone with someone, even if they are miles away, you can still tell something in their voice, if they feel sad, if they feel happy. So voice is another powerful instrument that helps us transfer and communicate our emotions. Again, we can use machine learning to identify how someone feels through the tone of their voice. And finally, the other way that's going to be the core topic today is how can we use the reactions of our autonomic nervous system to recognize human affect. So probably you have noticed how you sweat when you are stressed, or how your heart is pounding faster when you are angry. All those are indicators from your autonomic nervous system that is telling you that a particular emotional stimuli just happened. So what we are doing is monitoring those changes in the physiology of the user and correlating those changes to different emotions that the person is feeling at the same time. If we combine that with techniques coming from cognitive behavioral therapy, then you have a complete 360 intervention system when basically you understand how someone feels and then give them the right advice at the right time that will help them achieve their emotional well-being goals. So this is the basis of FEAR, the first smart wristband that is able to recognize and track human emotions to help people suffering from depression, anxiety, and stress live happier lives. And the wristband itself has a variety of sensors. We have three main sensors that help us do the emotion classification, as we call it, which is the galvanic screen response sensor, an optical heart rate monitor, and a skin temperature sensor. So out of those three, we extract over 160 linear and nonlinear characteristics that go as an input into our algorithms. And then we personalize this system to the individual in order to recognize 5 different emotional states. We're able to tell if someone is happy, if they're sad, if they're angry, if they feel stressed or not. However, what we don't have in this slide is basically the rest of the sensors that are included in this wristband. So we have another 3 sensors, basically an accelerometer, a humidity sensor, and an ambient temperature sensor that help us take the noise out of the 3 main signals that we have. So developing something in the lab is very different from developing something outside the lab. And you have to take into consideration all the different noise that is coming in, either in terms of people running and doing physical activity, or just because they go in and out in a place that has air conditioning or changes, very fast changes in temperature. So you have to take all those things into consideration, and that's why on top of those 3 sensors that you see in the screen, we have additional sensors that help us with this information. However, the secret sauce is truly in the algorithms. We are using deep learning techniques to identify and basically classify those 5 emotions. I would say that the process that we are following is the following. We take the signals, we take the noise out of the signals, we recognize if an emotional event happens, so what we call segmentation, and then we classify this event in one of those 5 categories, if any of those. So, okay, and what's next? Let's say we recognize how you felt, that's great, that's amazing. What do we do with the data? And this is the part of the intervention, right? It's the part where after we understand how someone feels, not only we keep track of their emotions in order to help them develop emotional awareness, but also we provide them with real-time coaching at the time that they need it the most. So if someone is stressed, we're going to tell them to do a breathing exercise. If someone is sad, we're going to tell them to write a gratitude letter. Or we'll play a song that they listened on Spotify a few days ago and made them feel happy. So we can really provide real-time coaching and personalized based on the taste of the individual. So if we ask you to do meditation and meditation doesn't help you at all, we will never tell you to do that again. And that's the importance of identifying and understanding how someone feels. Also, a very important part is helping the person identify their emotional patterns, how they feel over the past few days and weeks. And recent research in the field of positive psychology tells us that emotional awareness is the first step towards changing our negative emotional habits and developing new ones. I'm going to take a short break. Any questions that we have until now?
So compared to Apple Watch, for example, you have GSR, and what are the other?
So galvanic screen response is a sensor that doesn't exist in most of the wearables out there right now. Skin temperature and optical heart rate exists. We have also a humidity sensor, we have an ambient temperature sensor, and also the accelerometer, of course, is everywhere.
So my question is, like, if the algorithms are the secret sauce, you could use Apple Watch or not necessarily?
We wish we could, because we would not have to make hardware, which is very hard. But unfortunately, even if Apple Watch had those sensors, we would drain out their battery in like an hour. So we would not really be able to, we would like to use it, but I'm not sure that they would allow us to. And the reason is because basically we optimize everything in our wristband to make sure that it fulfills one purpose that we have, to do emotion recognition, nothing else. And Apple Watch is basically a platform. You're able to see your emails, your texts, to talk to someone. So it's like you can do a bunch of things, and it's not only a tool for emotion recognition. That's why you will see that we don't have a monitor, for example, in our wristband, because we don't want to waste energy anywhere else other than getting the right samples from the user.
So you send it real time to the phone? Or?
Yes, so with BLE we communicate to the phone and then to the cloud where the classification happens. Please.
How are you validating each of the emotions? Like you're running the algorithm, you're saying, oh, you're sad. How are you validating like sadness versus stress?
That's actually a really great question. So the way that we are doing our testing is, so we have developed a protocol with our psychologist, and we have selected specific videos that stimulate different emotions. So we're using, if you come to our office to do our testing, and we're gonna be looking for beta testers shortly, so let us know if you're interested. We will use VR goggles, you're gonna watch those videos, and we know what the videos are supposed to make you feel, and then we ask you how did you feel, and then we see what our algorithms were able to predict. So this is how we triangulate. In a study that we're doing with the Department of Psychology at UC Riverside, we're using also basically a headset, an ECG headset that is measuring the changes in the brain waves of the person. So we're doing a comparison metric there as well.
How intense do the emotions have to be for it to pick it up as different? I feel like there are months at a time in grad school where I might be chronically stressed, and I don't know if it could identify something like that low.
It's, to be honest, it's arousal is one of the aspects that we're looking for, which is intensity basically. We can recognize low arousal emotions as well. So, for example, sadness is a low intensity emotion, but we can recognize it in specific ways. It's a little bit harder, but we're able to do it. Also, the big differentiator is when an emotion is impactful to report it to the user. That's the important thing. So, for example, people might feel things like 100 times a day, right? Does it make sense to give this feedback to the user or not? Probably not. What we've seen and talking with many psychologists is that you have to report the 10 to 20 most impactful moments of the day to make sense. Otherwise, the user just gets bored of like seeing a bunch of data.
I think two questions. First of all, do you have any numbers of the classification accuracy? So how many times do you get agreement between algorithm and that?
We do have numbers and they are quite high, but unfortunately I cannot. It's not public information. I cannot tell you that. But by the time that we go to market, our goal is to never have basically a false positive, something that the user sees and they disagree about what they saw. And this is something that we're quite good at doing. We have a rejection algorithm basically that we can understand when we're not certain enough to report something back to the user.
And the other question is, I guess, more interesting, related to your last idea about actually communicating only the highest emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So someone could argue that that kind of defies the purpose because the person probably is aware already of the highest intensity stuff. So what's your thinking on that? Is there like a Goldilocks zone of medium level emotions that I'm not aware of and this thing will help me?
It's the purpose is to help you identify what is causing you to feel in a particular way, right? So if we go back to cognitive behavioral therapy, is this circle that thoughts cause emotions and emotions cause behaviors and behaviors cause thoughts, and it's a viral circle basically. So what we're trying to do is help you identify your emotional patterns. Let's say every time that you come to Stanford, you feel so happy. Maybe next time that you're sad, you should just have a walk to Stanford. So this is more impactful for more impactful emotions, and I agree with what you say. The person understands that they feel them right now, but our purpose is not to tell you how you feel right now. You know how you feel right now. The purpose is to help you identify your emotional patterns. So what we're doing is we create moments when we see different emotions, and then we add more information from your context. So from your calendar, from your GPS, let's say that you took a photo at the time, or you were listening on a song on Spotify, and we put all this and creating something like an emotional calendar. So when you go back through your day, you can say, yeah, when I was with this person, I was feeling very happy, something was going on there. And if you see those things repeating themselves, then you take action, basically. Our goal in the future is basically identifying what makes you feel happy or what makes you feel sad, and either trying to change this negative habit or reinforce the positive one.
Do you treat emotions as being absolute or relative? So for example, is there some baseline where someone's like normal and a deviation from that is happy or sad? Or what if you have someone who's just always a bit down?
Yeah, it's absolutely they are relative. So what we're doing is, so remember that I told you that we get 160 characteristics out of the 3 sensors. So we develop a 160-dimensional world, okay? So imagine a very big house with many rooms. And we know that happiness is room 1, sadness is room 5, anger is room 10. When we see that you are closer to one of those emotions, this is what makes us understand that to report this particular emotion to you. Emotions are not threshold based. An emotion and the response of your body is never going to be the same. So, but it's going to be closer to the pattern that you had the previous time. So this is what we are doing. I don't know if that answers the question.
Sort of. I mean, how do you guys define a baseline?
So we have a pre-trained model that is quite accurate, and then we personalize it to the individual to make it even more accurate. Absolutely.
There's a population that may be either nonverbal or non-communicative that may have emotional regulation issues. Have you considered, or are you working with a population that would allow for a wristband that would allow a caregiver, for example, to monitor those emotions?
That's where we want to go in the next few years. Unfortunately, right now we're still investigating with general population with no specific issues or disorders or facing emotional regulation issues. And that's why we start from being a consumer product and not a medical device by any means. We're a tool, an educational tool for people. So we haven't done significant testing in these types of populations yet, but our goal is to go there sooner than later.
Thank you.
Absolutely. The big issue with those populations, just to add something on that, is that because we're using machine learning algorithms and we need to train our algorithms, in many cases the person is not able to self-report how they were feeling in order to do the calibration. However, if we believe that if we get enough data, we will be able, even with our pre-trained model, without having the feedback from the user, to give high accuracy results.
So you have, as you mentioned, multiple sensors on the device on the platform. Can you at least share with us maybe you do some kind of fusion part of it.
Yeah.
Can you tell us maybe what is the most prevalent, prominent one in terms of where do you get the best inputs?
So I would say that from those 3 that are responsible for the emotion classification, I would say that the 2 first are the most important ones. Skin temperature as well, but so I don't know if we have any psychologists in the group, but psychologists usually use terms like arousal and valence. So usually galvanic response is much more associated with arousal, which is the intensity of an emotion. For example, anger is a high arousal emotion. Joy is a high arousal emotion. And sadness is a low arousal emotion. And the valence is coming, I would say, predominantly from the heart rate monitoring. Of course, we are fusing the data, so this is like if my co-founder was here, he wouldn't allow me to say those things, but he's the brains behind this thing. So, but yeah, it's I would say that predominantly the two sensors on the top are the most important ones. Okay, let's move forward, and we'll have time for more questions later on. So, after we discussed a little bit about the product, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about the vision and why this could potentially be important. So, we start, as I mentioned, as a consumer product, right? Like a Fitbit for emotions, basically. But our goal is to become a tool for psychotherapy and mental health. We see that almost every practice, every medical practice now has tools to monitor the well-being or different aspects of their patients. However, mental health has nothing. Similar to a cardiologist that is using a blood pressure monitor or a diabetic that is using a glucose monitor, we envision feel or similar devices being used by mental health patients and psychotherapists to help them monitor their emotional state and also receive real-time 24/7 support when the person needs it the most. And this is what we hear from cases of caregivers, as you mentioned before, that they cannot be with their loved ones 24/7, but they want to know if something's going on. We hear that from people suffering from bipolar disorder, for example, or for people suffering from depression. So in the future we see Phil becoming a tool for psychotherapy, and even later down the road we envision a world of artificial sentience. I don't know if you're familiar with the term. It's basically how everything around us will be able to understand and react to what we feel in order to not only make us happier but provide us with personalized support when we need it. So we call this era the Internet of Emotions era, and there are a lot of fun applications related to that, and many industries are going to be affected by emotional technology. So those industries, of course.
This is your buyout slide.
Actually, no, it used to be though. Of course, we talked about wearables and how those technologies would be relevant for well-being and monitoring the wellness of the person. We see a lot of interest from the internet service and application space. So in the future, you might be, if you're using Tinder, emotions might play a role there as well. And we've seen a lot of interest from companies like Spotify. Their CEO tweeted about us, and they started a business development process about how they are going to use our data to personalize their music lists. So you're going to be listening to a specific song because you feel in a particular way and not the other way around. Also, we see a lot of interest in the retail and CPG space, in the entertainment industry, and of course, we talked about healthcare. Mental health is a priority in that space, and we see a lot of interest from that industry. So the future is quite interesting, and those technologies will definitely help us develop emotional awareness and actually become happier. So that's our goal. Yeah, so yeah, that's pretty much it from me. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions in general about what we do, about our science, and happy to answer. I think that we have more time, right? So
yes, you have more time. Unfortunately, our second speaker was not able to make it today, so please feel free to ask more questions, and once we're done, you can also ask.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to. So any questions that you might have, I'd be happy to answer.
With regards to heart rate that you mentioned is an indicator of.
Can you? I cannot hear you. Sorry about
With
that.
regards to heart rate that you mentioned that is an indicator for the valence, how much accuracy have you seen? Because some of the papers are kind of saying that it's kind of inconclusive, whether it's negative valence, for example, my heart rate is negative valence, or it's kind of, and then they said probably probably the most accurate one is facial expressions as a way of, how is your experience with that?
Definitely the facial expressions one, the techniques that we're using computer vision is a much more developed technique. Even in the consumer space or in a more B2B space, those are techniques that people have been working on for the past 10-15 years now outside of academia, while the monitoring of physiological signals as an indicator of different emotional states is something that actually started 2 years ago. Outside of the lab, right? In the lab, in universities like MIT, there has been research in that over the past 25 years, right? So it's not something that we are doing for the first time or whatsoever. However, going back to your question about heart rate, first of all, we fuse the data. So the more sensors you have, the easier it is to recognize a particular emotional state. You have more data points, which makes it more accurate for you. Also, if you train the algorithms, the results become much more accurate. And what we have seen based on the testing that we have done to over 300 people so far is that actually we can get pretty accurate data from that. If you consider just heart rate by itself and you try to make any conclusions, yes, I wouldn't be very optimistic that this would be a very high accuracy one.
I can see technology can feel people's emotion, but I'm thinking about it's a scene. You can check the scene model from our normal people to a normal person. Like some guy could suddenly become crazy and then want to do something terrible.
Mm-hmm.
But the policeman can know. It's great.
So we don't make any decisions, we don't make any diagnosis right now. We are just an educational tool. We're monitoring in a similar way that a fitness tracker will monitor your activity. In a similar way, we just monitor the emotions of the user. In the future, there might be applications like this. I think that we have to be very careful in terms of the ethics that we build around those types of technologies and how we share our data. On our side, we're committed to not sharing personal data because they are so important to the user and so personal to the user. But who knows? In the future, everything is possible. Maybe Google is doing advertising based on the emotional state of the user. Who knows? All of those are possible.
So one common argument against Fitbit and other devices like this is that the retention rate is very low. And do you have any thoughts about how to retain customers in your case?
Absolutely. So in our case, retention is not going to be a problem. And the reason is because the people that we are targeting, people suffering from anxiety, stress, depression in many cases, are people that have a very intense need for a product like this. What they are suffering from is the most important issue in their lives, and they are paying thousands of dollars to doing psychotherapy or other forms of medication. So for these people, having something that can monitor the changes in their emotional state is very important, and it really cannot compare with the need of someone to lose a few pounds and to basically become a little bit more fit. So that's why retention is going to be very different. Please.
Follow up to that question. So from what I understand, if you make people wear a blood pressure cuff for 24 hours, it even makes it worse for them because then their blood pressure goes up because of the anxiety level.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't think people that already have anxiety wearing it constantly will, I mean, I'm sure they're trained to it, but it hasn't been a concern that patients have complained or someone.
We haven't seen anything like that right now based on the customer discovery that we have done. So far we have almost 10,000 people in our community that we reach out to basically ask for advice and feedback, and we haven't heard that yet. The only thing that they were telling us was that they don't want other people to know, and they don't want to see it in real time. So that's why we don't have a monitor in the wristband, and that's why we're never gonna tell you in real time how you feel. The only intervention that we are doing in real time is in cases of very intense emotions. So let's say that you're having a panic attack. that's the point that we're going to intervene and tell you to do breathing exercise. But that's one of the very few cases that this is going to happen. Or if we see that you're driving and you have like a very stressful situation or something like that. And in those cases, we will probably intervene on the wristband, so we'll just do a nudge through a vibration or something, or haptic interface. But most of the times, we're not going to tell the person, you're feeling like this right now, like this, because we're going to lead them to feeling like this, even if they're not.
So, I imagine that the response time of, say, your heart rate to a specific emotion, to the onset of a specific emotion might be pretty quick. For example, say I am like almost run over by a car. Yes, my heart rate will go up pretty fast. But in terms of the other sensors that you're using, what's the response time in those terms? For example, will your skin temperature change in the time span of like a Spotify song?
Mm-hmm. So first of all, the Spotify use case is very different than the mental health use case, right? What's really important is to understand what you need to recognize and what not. So for example, if we don't make any recognition that for emotions that last less than 30 seconds. If an emotion lasts less than 30 seconds, we don't think that it's impactful for the user to report it to. For Spotify, it's very different, right? Because you're changing songs and you need to identify if it was a good mood or not. So we see that, for example, the skin temperature sensor is, as I mentioned, is not the primary one that we're using. Galvanic skin response has pretty good response time. However, we are not monitoring, so we are not looking at the amplitude of the signals necessarily, and the indicators and the characteristics that we're extracting are not so sensitive in the time that it requires for the body to respond, if that makes sense.
So you're looking at characteristics that are not sensitive to, I guess, time?
Exactly. It's like they could change, even if you don't see a spike on the signal visually, we can monitor that there is a significant change because there is something happening there.
With respect to haptic intervention, what type of haptic intervention do you use and where on the body do you apply haptic intervention?
It's going to be on the wristband, basically, and we are considering a few different breathing techniques. It's not going to be version 1 of the product, unfortunately, because this is nice to have at this stage. But yes, it's going to be through some breathing techniques or basically some different ways to notify the user that something happened and they need to go to their cell phone to see what they should do. And also we're considering a few ways to help people communicate through haptic language their emotions. So that would be something interesting as well.
How do you approach the ethical questions of your technology? So for now you're able to monitor emotions and educate people, but at some point you may able to control emotions too. How do you approach it?
So again, goes back to the ethics questions. So we need to be very careful about how we affect the emotional state of the person, and we try not to lead the person to a particular emotion. So even if you see the new UX and UI of our application, you will see that we don't put a particular name to an emotion. We let the user identify the name. We tell them that we saw that something positive happened, tell us more, and they say if it was joy or it was content. The reason for that is because we don't want to make them feel something just because we told them so. What is really interesting is how potentially in the future we could have robots with emotions. So like, okay, now we are talking about recognizing human emotions, but what if we could stimulate emotions to robots and have like, play God and create human beings, humanoids. I don't know if you're familiar with the singularity concept and all those stuff, but it's really interesting to think about it.
Sorry, I just totally lost you in like the last 3 sentences.
Sure.
So, and this is just my own ignorance, not what you said. So, how does this if you have a robot, you're trying to get them to feel emotion or communicate the appearance of being emotional actors.
This is something you can do right now. So have the robot understand how you feel, but potentially in the future, why not being able to have like artificial emotional intelligence where the robot has feelings and can interact with humans in a more emotional way. Not because they understand your feelings, but because they have feelings. So. Like just
yes, this is like metaphysical, but
yeah,
there's really interesting stuff if you look at what happened to Facebook, where they had two AIs chatting with one another, who then developed their own language and started cheating and fooling one another. And so those things can emerge spontaneously in certain situations, and they're probably operationally very similar to how humans engage with one another. So I agree, it's interesting.
Yeah, we're talking later down the road, but
yeah. Soon.
Yeah.
One question regarding the device again. So have you taken, like you mentioned before, the stigma that is important?
Is what?
The stigma that is important. So what about if somebody is just wearing a band and he knows that other people know that he's wearing a band for monitoring his mental health? Could that be kind of bad situation? Like, have you had comments on that? Like, would it be preferable to have it somewhere concealed rather than have it in your wrist?
Yeah, so we thought a lot about that. We talked a lot with early adopters about that, and we saw that some of them, I would say 30% of people that actually suffer from subclinical or clinical mental health issues, and they are doing psychotherapy. They don't share that with their friends and relatives and their network. And we try really hard to, one of our goals is to help destigmatize mental health. Of course, we see like another 70% of the people that are like very proud for taking action for mental health issues and react to mental health like in the way that they should, like it is a disease, right, for many of those people. And we're not talking about people that suffer from stress or like they're going through a stressful time. We're talking about people that could potentially be ill and suffer from a disease. Depression is a disease. So we should not definitely react to it like it's something that is not it's not an issue. So yeah, going back to your question, absolutely, we have heard that. The way that we promote and market our product is as a happiness bracelet. We never use the word depression, anxiety, or whatsoever. Although we know that the people that need it the most are those people. But we see this being part of, and going back to your point about iWatch, like in 10 years' time, those sensors are going to be in the mainstream consumer electronics world, and then it's going to be totally normal to have people tracking their mood.
Are you wearing one right now?
So this is just a looks like. My co-founder doesn't allow me to wear functional prototypes. He says I'm clumsy and I'm going to break them, which is true only 95% of the times. So
he seems quite controlling.
He wants to control my emotions.
Yeah. I think there was one more question here. Sure.
Are you going to have to deal with FDA approval for the second revision of the product? Or?
So FDA doesn't regulate those types of devices that are educational tools for wellness, so the Fitbits and the like. But if you make any diagnosis or treatment, then you will need to get FDA approval. At this stage, we are an educational tool. Maybe later down the road, it's something that we should consider. Of course, something else, although we don't require FDA approval, the way that we're producing the product fulfills all the medical device requirements and it's fully HIPAA compliant, etc.
Just to change gear toward the end, can you tell us about this story? Because you are also a young startup, 2.5 years. I know people already have a startup here or thinking about a startup. Can you go back through the time, what you really experienced? Tell us about your story.
Okay. Yeah, so we started 2.5 years ago from New York. I think the reason why we started is On the one side, both my co-founder and I had personal experiences of anxiety. Both of us had anxiety attacks that year because we were working 100-hour weeks. And both of us started doing mood journaling. So I don't know if you've ever done it. It's like keeping a journal in general, but it's a little bit tough to keep track of how you feel and write it down every time. So his PhD thesis was in the field of affective computing, and he started telling me about how you can use sensors to monitor your mood and see how you're feeling. I was like, come on, man, those things don't exist. Actually, there are many papers, of course. So when I realized that this actually could be a thing, we quit our jobs. We got funding from a hardware incubator in Los Angeles, where we developed our first prototypes. So we moved from New York to Los Angeles, then moved north to San Francisco to fundraise. And then we moved to China to develop our product. So we spent another 6 months in China. Now my co-founder is in China. I'm to run our first production run. I'm here focusing mostly on the business. And we have also a team of an R&D team in Greece. Right now we're 15 people in total and growing. And yeah, so it's a really exciting experience. I would say, like many people ask, like, should I do a startup? Should I not do a startup? Like, if you are not very passionate about something, don't do a startup. But if there is no other way, like, if you feel that you want to do it no matter what, then that's the indication to do a startup.
Thank you very much, George. I think we could call it for now, but maybe you have 5 more minutes for extra questions after on the way. I know that you have to go to the airport soon. So thank you all for coming today. Sorry for the small change in plan. I hope the at least kind of discussion part of the second part of the event was interesting too. Looking forward to see you on the next event. I just have to give George the eWear cup, which is also what we love to our students.